So the next person we're bringing on stage is Kingsley. So he'll be discussing GitHub for designers. A round of applause for Kingsley, please. Let's have it. You guys should energy, energy. Okay.
Everyone, good morning. Can you all hear me? If you can hear me, can you give me a wave, please? Okay, so next slide, please. I'm just going to run down because I have limited time. Um, next slide, next slide. Okay, so how can you start contributing as a designer using GitHub? Onazi said something about, contributing using Figma, maybe creating Figma UI kits and all that. So I'm going to talk about how to do that using GitHub. Next slide. So if you're a designer here, can you wave, please? Let me know. Ah, only two designers. Okay. So, okay, first to contribute to projects, right? Not like there's something you need to understand. You are not designing on GitHub, but GitHub is just a tool. It's a technical tool that will first help you find the project, discover the project you want to contribute to. So first is finding the project. So I'm going to use a particular project where I currently contribute to, and also the design maintainer on the project. So next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so I just want to assume that we all have a GitHub account, but if you don't have one as a designer, so you can go ahead, create one. So once you've created one, the next thing you have to do is go to I know the project's name. So repository are more like a project folder, like you have folders on your PC. So, but the folder is probably hosted in Landmark, right? So everybody in this premises can access that folder. So that's basically GitHub repository. That's what it does. So different projects host their this thing, project folder on GitHub. So what you do is that you want to find the folder and discover issues in the folder you can solve as a designer. So now you go to GitHub and just search. So these are like filter options. So you can filter by repository. That's if you know the project's name. So you can search by repository. So next slide. So for example, okay. So once you've visited the project repository, the next thing you have to look up is a read.me file. So this is kind of like standard for every project. Every project must have a read.me, a readme.md file rather. It's a markdown file. So this is a file where you have to read, learn about the project. Because I always say this, that you can't contribute to a project you don't understand. To contribute effectively to a project, you have to first understand the project. So this is kind of like a rundown of a particular project I'm currently contributing to. So you learn about the rules, the code of conduct, and how you can contribute to the project. So next slide. Okay, so this is the issue. Yeah, so this is still the project repository results. Yeah, so I had to kind of like put the read.me file where you have to read about it. So this is still searching based on repository. Next slide, please. Okay, so once you visited the project repository, now one other thing you see, this kind of like the default, page you get. So you see, you have the code option, you have the issue option. Now the issues is where you find design. Issues are more like tags, right? Is where you find design tags, right? And another option is that while searching for this project, you can also decide to search based on design. If you're a graphic designer, you can search for maybe graphic design issue on GitHub, right? You can search for UI design issues on GitHub. So now these are, for example, you can see they're all labeled. And as a designer, I always encourage, always be on the lookout for a good first issue. Now, by standard, every open source project is supposed to have files, issues that are labeled good first issue for first timer. This actually allows you as a newbie that intends to contribute to the project to know, the first project. So once you've discovered, let's say for example, you see revamp footer, combine these and all that. These are all design issues. So next slide, please. Now, once you've discovered the issue, the next thing you have to do is find out if the task has been assigned to someone else. It's open source, anybody can jump on it, but you need permission from the project maintainer to be sure that this task wasn't assigned to avoid conflict. As a maintainer, I've dealt with some conflict in open source, so you have to avoid that. Next slide. Next slide. So another way you can engage to be sure that the project hasn't been assigned to someone else or the issue is start a conversation, right, in the comment section, ask questions. Next slide. Okay, once you've actually discovered all these, you've ascertained that the issue wasn't assigned, you can jump in on Figma, on Penpot, right, on XD, or any of these tools you use and start doing your design. Next slide. Now, always ensure that your design files are accessible. The only reason why it's open source is because the source has to be open, right? Your design file must always be accessible to all contributors. Next slide. Now, for some community, you add links to your folder and stuff and all that. So next slide. So find set the project on GitHub, look for a design task that you can handle, leave a comment to confirm that it hasn't been assigned. Then once approval, you can jump and start contributing. Now always remember to make your work file accessible. Next slide. So when you join, understand any community, always ask questions, make sure you attend meetings to understand the project. This is very important. Next slide, which is actually my last this thing. So thank you, connect with me on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and all that. It's just basically the same username. And I have a full documentation on this, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn and you see a full documentation on this. Thank you so much, guys.